Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Basel Pod. I'm Sam Basel, joined alongside Jordan Laube, and this is episode 3 of our 2025 NFL division breakdowns. First off, we covered the NFC East and the AFC East, and if you want to catch up on those, you can either listen to both full episodes wherever you get your House Enterprise podcasts, whether that be on Spotify, YouTube, or houseenterprise.com. And if you're looking for individual team breakdowns derived from those episodes, you can head over to our House Enterprise YouTube channel, where we've got a full playlist with each video broken down by the 8 teams that we've covered so far. By the end of tonight, it's going to be 12 teams because we're covering the NFC North, home of the Lions, Packers, Bears, and Vikings. Hopefully, we'll be a contentious division. But first off, before we get into the team breakdowns, Jordan, how you doing 3 episodes in so far?
And we're doing great. I think we've had great coverage so far. I'm looking for more tonight. It's Friday night, so I'm enjoying myself with a Cutwater Tiki Rum Mai Tai. Definitely try those if you have not, but be careful. They're 12.5% alcohol per can. So pretty much 3 drinks in 1 can. So just pace yourself if you're going to have one. I'm drinking out of a can. You can do it on ice. I prefer it that way, but for podcast sakes, out of the can is completely fine. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Excited to talk about the NFC North. Outside of, the AFC East, which is the home to my New York Jets. So that's probably, the AFC East is probably the division I pay attention to the most closely. The NFC North is probably one of my favorite divisions to watch on any given basis. I mean, every single week where there's an in-division game in this division, it feels like a playoff game. Considering that last year's NFC North was won by, 1 game with the Packers, only 3 games out behind the Lions and the Vikings, 1 game out. Every single game feels like a playoff game, and last year was no exception. And this year, I feel like all these teams are heading into the season with something to prove, right? Obviously, the Lions, they came up short in the playoffs last year, losing to a really hot Washington team in the divisional round as the 1 seed. Obviously, Green Bay, they got bounced out. Minnesota got bounced out, both in the wild card round. So they're, trying to, continue this development that they've got. And the Bears, we're continuing the Caleb Williams era. We're trying to see how they can improve from a 5-12 record and maybe contend in this division. It's really hard to say because, we've got a lot of teams in this. Everyone in this division is trying to go up, right? Like there's nobody in a rebuild. There's nobody kind of in a tank mode here. So everyone really has something to prove. So I think all of these games in this division are going to be incredibly contentious. I don't know if you'd agree.
I would agree. I mean, even if you look at last year, there's some games we'll talk about in this podcast. But, I mean, the Packers went 1-5 in this division and still made playoffs and were in some close games in the division. The Bears had a lot of 1-score, 1-possession games in their division where if they win a few of those, their season looks a lot different than it looked at the end of 2024. So, I mean, this division has always been super competitive. It's going to continue to be super competitive. And I'm not going to say it's wide open, but there's been enough change with the Lions and enough change with the Vikings that the Packers and Bears are going to be fighting for, either the top seed in the NFC North or at least a wild card spot from the NFC North. It's going to be probably more competitive this year than last year, just in terms of how much closer these teams are, even 1 year removed from 2024.
Yeah, and let's start off with the reigning division champs, the Detroit Lions. They won their 2nd consecutive NFC North. Last season marked the 2nd consecutive year in which they've had 10 wins, which is the first time they had ever done that in franchise history. It also marked the first time they had won a Thanksgiving game since 2016. As we enter year 3 of the Dan Campbell era, after the Lions have kind of been the joke of the NFL in a lot of ways for almost our entire lifetimes, right? I mean, going back, you can go back to, even our grandparents. I mean, they've had up and down periods, but for the most part, I mean, this has been a franchise marked by their struggles. Dan Campbell, when he came in, took over the he took over the franchise. He talked about changing the mentality around this team. And in 2 years, I mean, he brought them to a 15-2 record and, to the divisional round of the playoffs as the 1 seed. What I guess my first kind of not our burning question tonight, but my first kind of overarching question is there anything left for Dan Campbell to prove? Anything left for him to change for this team so they can, kind of make a larger playoff push?
I mean, kind of to state the obvious, but winning a Super Bowl, right? Like Lions have never won one. They've never even been to a Super Bowl, right? So just getting there is half the battle. Winning it would isolate him as one of the best coaches of all time, just because you took a laughingstock of the NFL for the past 70 years and finally made them something memorable and something that to be threatened and intimidated by, right? Like the Lions for the longest time, like, yeah, they had superstars. They had Barry Sanders. They had Calvin Johnson. They had a couple of other guys in that span as well. And the Ndamukong Suh early in his career was looking like a Hall of Fame caliber player, and probably is, not first ballot, but probably will be in the Hall of Fame just with how dominant he was his entire career. But outside of those big playmakers, they've kind of just been chumps. And he has taken a team of chumps and turned them into superstars, studs, Pro Bowl caliber players, which I know Pro Bowl people think it's a popularity contest. With how they do the voting in the NFL versus every other league, it's not. It's players, it's coaches, it's executives are voting. Fan vote is only 25% of the equation now. So making a Pro Bowl, which there's a couple of funny ones in there. Obviously, Tyler Huntley is one of those. This is another conversation for another time. But still, they have those guys on this team that, when you look past the box score, are perfect role players for what this team is looking for. And I think that's kind of what makes the Lions who they are, is that they take these players who've kind of been misfits or castaways in other programs, and they find perfect situations for them here. And that starts with Dan Campbell, with how he sets a tone with grit, with being a dog, with biting off people's kneecaps, which everyone laughed at that in 2021 when he had his first press conference. But I bet every team in the NFL now wishes they were biting the kneecaps off of other teams, because they do it better than anybody else has done in the past 10 years of NFL play.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get into that quote in a second, but I just wanted to, I'm a Jets fan, you're a Cards fan, but I wanted to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of a Lions fan that's around our age, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Dan Campbell took over the team, he brought them to a 3-13-1 record in his first season. If you're someone our age or maybe a little bit younger, you were alive to remember an 0-16 Lions team, right? That Dan Campbell was a member of as a player. So for a 3-13-1 record 4 years ago and an 0-16 record, early on in your lifetime, to now hearing you say the next thing that they have to prove is whether they can win a Super Bowl in just 4 years' time. I mean, how insane must that be for a Lions fan?
That's got to be nuts. I mean, like, if that was me as a Cardinals fan, like, I remember, the Cardinals are, like, working their way back. But besides that Super Bowl run and then the NFC Championship run, the Cardinals have been dog shit. The Jets are kind of in the same boat. Besides the 2009 and 2010 seasons, kind of been dog shit, right? Like, a few playoff appearances here and there, some glimmers of hope. Same thing with the Lions. They made the playoffs in 2015 or 2016 when Matt Stafford and Golden Tate were connecting nonstop every game. Like, you have those moments of hope, but now the Lions have pushed the envelope, and it's no longer hope. This is the standard. And I hope for you and my sake, the Jets and Cardinals can make that happen. But for the Lions fan that has suffered for years and years, and some of them their entire lives, even people that are 40 and 50, they've been suffering. Now to see that come to fruition and seeing them get as close as they did, almost blowing out the 49ers and then throwing that game away. Injuries set them back last year against the Commanders. If they were fully healthy, I think they're winning that Super Bowl. I don't think the Eagles even come close to coming within 2 possessions of that Lions team last year. But, man, it's like they just need 1 or 2 breaks and they're there. And I don't know if that's going to happen this year with how much turnover this team from an organizational standpoint is going to face. But maybe Dan Campbell has enough juice that it won't matter, that he can turn that corner and say, I don't care how much adversity we're going through. I don't care who we lost or who we're bringing in. We are taking it another step further this upcoming season, and we're going to Super Bowl. We'll see what happens. There's more question marks for me than solidified answers, and we'll get into that as we talk about the Lions. But Man, if there's any coach I would put stock into subvert all expectations and exceed them, it's Dan Campbell.
Yeah, and you going back to the bite your kneecaps quote. Obviously, like you said, it kind of got memed when he first took over the team, but now we're really seeing that anyone who doubted the bite your kneecaps quote kind of got bit in the butt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only was that quote describing just the resilience of this team and just how much they put 110%, how much they want to kind of hone in their effort for every game, but it also kind of translated directly to the style of football that they've played on the field. So could you kind of elaborate as to how they've kind of metaphorically bitten the kneecaps of their opponents through their playbook?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously this is going to change with John Morton taking over as the offensive coordinator, coming over from Denver. But Ben Johnson the past 3 years has really established one of the most true grit football offenses we've ever seen. NFL is obviously becoming a high octane passing offense, spread the ball out, punch it down your throat through the pass game and RPOs. But he really took a step back and said, how can I modernize traditional football with 3 yards in a cloud of dust while making it standardized with motion, with 12 personnel rather than 21 or your traditional 11 personnel that we're seeing in the NFL today? How can he use similar schemes and similar looks to manipulate your defense into favorable looks that he wants? And we're going to break those down right now. And this is as true as football gets, right? He was run first mentality. They were 5th and 7th in run rates on first and second down, respectively. You don't see that level of percentage run plays in the NFL on a successful team the way that the Lions did. They were 5th in yards before contact per attempt. So that's before running back gets touched. How many yards they're getting? They got 1.6. That was 5th. That shows how good your offensive line has to be and how in step they are with each other. Not just the individual players, but how they work as a unit. They were first in play action rate on all downs. 38% play action rate is bonkers in today's NFL because you can run that from gun and everyone knows it's play action. This is a team that got under center over 57% of the time and ran play action over just at 38% of the time, right? Like, that's not unheard of in today's NFL, but at those numbers is so against the status quo that almost every NFL offense has become. That's massive. And then if we look at first and second down for play action, they were 1st and 6th in play action rate on first and second down, respectively, right? Like, just so against the grain of what every NFL offense has become, that it's creating these tendencies that teams can't adjust for, and it's showing with how they're scoring, how they're getting yards, and on 4th down, just how they're pushing the envelope, right? So if we look at 4th down, they were 1st in the red zone on 4th down in terms of how often they're going for it at almost 50%, 47.8. So even though they're in field goal range and they can take the easy 3 points, they're going for it almost half the time, which is insane. Like, analytics would say otherwise, like, hey, take the 3 points, but Dan Campbell's like, nope, we're going to punch it down your throat. We're going to get a first down, and we're going to get points out of it. And then in that no man's land range where you're kind of in field goal range, but you're also kind of in punt range, but you don't want to punt it too far and put it into the end zone, we call that your own 45 to the other team's 45 in no man's zone. They were tied for first in going for it on 4th down at 37.5%. This is a team that ran the table when it came to changing how analytics is thought of in football, changing how we think about 4th down, because Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell came together and said, look, why are we going to restrict ourselves to 3 downs when we can have 4 downs to run our offense how we want? And that's why their run rate is so high. Their play action rate was so high. It's because instead of playing in 3 downs where you can only run it once or run play action once, they're like, okay, we can run it twice. We can run play action twice. And depending on what we gain on those, we can run it 3 or 4 times, or we can run 3 or 4 play actions. Or when teams are scrambled and they think we're going to run, we'll pass it 4 downs in a row if it gets to that. We don't care. We're going to make plays happen because we're treating it as a 4-down game instead of 3 and then punt or 3 and then field goal, which a lot of teams unfortunately get stuck thinking like that. And they get stuck thinking conservatively and that we need points. We need points. Well, Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson said, well, we need points, and 6 points or 7 points is better than 3. So let's get points that way rather than settling for 3. And that has revolutionized the game across the NFL just within the past 3 years. And you're seeing the fourth down go rates spike for every team across the NFL, except maybe 2 or 3. But it's incredible what this mentality and how this offense is structured has re-revolutionized football in a revolutionary period that's become more pass heavy and has really flipped the script from run heavy offenses to let's put our quarterback in the best position possible. And the Lions do that bar none better than anybody else.
And I wanted to talk about that quarterback, obviously being Jared Goff. This is going to be year 5 of him on the Lions. Once he finishes this season, he'll have played as many in Detroit that he did in LA. He played 5 seasons in LA. Last season specifically, you look at his stats over his career. I wouldn't really say that he, made a huge jump, like personal statistics wise, from LA to Detroit. Last season, he did score his, career high passing touchdowns. He had his best yards per attempt, but in terms of yardage and everything, it's pretty level throughout the board. It's not really better or worse, but he's obviously a lot more successful games wise. He's winning a lot more games. So can you kind of elaborate on how this specific Dan Campbell system has either helped a guy like Jared Goff or how Jared Goff has kind of been a big piece of this system succeeding?
Absolutely. And if I could compare it to the NBA in a really weird way, I would say Matt Stafford is like Steph Curry in the same way that Jared Goff is DeMar DeRozan, where like DeMar DeRozan is going to pull up from mid-range. He's going to hit layered shots. He might shoot the 3 here and there, and he's going to run to the rack here and there, where Steph Curry can kind of score from all over the field, but he's better in the deep to mid area than he is the short game. That's kind of how you have to view Matt Stafford versus Jared Goff, where Matt Stafford fits that Sean McVay style offense where we're going to run duo, we're going to run blast, we're going to run power at you all game long, and then we're going to tell Matt Stafford, hey, now that they're creeping up, fit it over the top of the linebackers and underneath the safeties, or just take a deep shot against them. And Matt Stafford has elevated that Rams offense that way. Kind of like Steph Curry, he elevates Golden State by his range and his ability to get to the bucket in that short intermediate range. But the deep ball is always a threat, or the deep shot is always a threat. Or Chris Middleton, or excuse me, not Chris Middleton. That's another guy I was thinking of. DeMar DeRozan kind of takes advantage of that mid-range, and he'll go to the rack and shoot threes here and there, but he'll just kind of fit it over defenders in that mid-range spot. That's what Jared Goff excels at. That short game, that intermediate game, like he is one of the best intermediate throwers in the NFL, whether it's over the middle or on the sidelines, and he's working on designed rollouts or he's standing firm in the pocket. Like he does such a great job layering the football over linebackers and right in front of the safeties. And it helps when you have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. Tim Patrick came in last year and helped in that area a little bit. But if you need to take the top off of defense, you can throw it up to Jameson Williams because of the speed. And Jared Goff is not going to throw it on a rope 30 to 40 yards downfield, but he will loft it right over the safety perfectly into the bucket for Jameson Williams. And he can get busy in the short area too. And that's kind of what I like about Jared Goff, is that even though he's quote unquote limited in terms of arm strength, his arm talent that's like kind of people like, if you have a strong arm, you have great arm talent. That's not necessarily the case. Like we'll talk about Brock Purdy in the NFC West episode. His arm talent's crazy because of how he can layer throws. Jared Goff is in that same conversation of the arm angles, the arm slots, the off platform versus on, and fitting balls in where they need to and fitting passes into tight windows. Jared Goff is really, really solid in that category. And that's amplified by how this offense is run with the play action, with the aggressiveness on fourth down, with where they target guys in the red zone and how they leverage the run game and weaponize the run game to help the pass game, he is perfect for the system. And that's why it's one of the best win-win trades in NFL history. The Rams got a Super Bowl. The Lions got the perfect quarterback for the type of offense they want to run.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's funny. I wanted to ask you that when we did our NFC West pod. Like, it was the Stafford Goff trade like the biggest win-win trade that we've ever seen?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
I would say so.
Awesome.
Absolutely. No, it's funny because Jared Goff was at that point in his career where he was kind of tailing off. Stafford was still doing well, but people were like, he's getting older. Does he still have it? And at the time, I was shocked that the Lions got 2 first-rounders and Jared Goff in that trade, especially since he's almost a decade younger than Matt Stafford. But in terms of what the strength was the Rams needed and what the Lions needed, I think the value now was completely fair, and the Lions are greatly established now for the long term, and the Rams got their Super Bowl. Now, can they get back there? That's another conversation for the NFC West episode. But in terms of the Lions, their window is going to be much more wide open than any other team with a high-end caliber quarterback. Like, Jared Goff is like floating in that top 10 range, like probably borderline. But you don't have to overpay him now because you know what he can do. You know the value he brings. And he still performs at a high level despite that. Like, and he's okay with taking a little bit of a pay cut compared to the rest of the quarterback market because he knows how this offense operates and what he needs to do for it. And that's what makes this Lions team so exciting, even with the turnover, is that no matter who steps in at OC, this offense, in terms of the players and X's and O's that are there, is perfectly tailored for Jared Goff. That if you're an OC and you come in, you're not going to be able to change much. And which is fine for someone like John Morton, because you have Dan Campbell who's going to help usher them in and say, hey, this is how we do things here. I want you to have your input here and there, but this is what works for us. Find some wrinkles, find some, analytics that can help us get a break here and there, but this is our mentality. This is how we run, and Jared Goff is the perfect guy to help us lead us to where we want to go, which eventually is a Super Bowl win.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the fourth down aggressiveness. Obviously, like you said earlier, the Lions have kind of revolutionized the game, and we're seeing a lot of other teams adopt this ambition to go for it on fourth down rather than just punt or kick a field goal if you're in range. Obviously, with any sort of big strategic trend in any sport, right, there's going to be the first team that does it gets a big advantage. Everyone starts to catch up. And then once that kind of becomes the, for lack of a better term to borrow from video games, like once that kind of becomes like the meta, right, it's less of an advantage and more of just what you run. How much longer do you feel like Detroit has before most of the teams that have already started running it or have yet to implement it? How much more time do you think Detroit has before they kind of lose the advantage of their aggressiveness?
I think that's an awesome question. Number one, I would say that the time is unlimited because Ben Johnson took a head coaching job, right? Like, it's like, as much as it is Dan Campbell running like the system and the mentality, Ben Johnson was the genius behind the X's and O's of what made this offense great. So now teams, they know how aggressive they are. Now they have to learn potentially a whole different system. Like, I personally don't think that. I think Dan Campbell is going to keep this system and the tendencies relatively similar and let Morton plug in the X's and O's to fit the system he has in place with high play action rate, high fourth down go percentage, keeping the offensive line the focal point of this offense, right? Like, he's going to tell John to run this offense in that style, but bring in your own kind of rhythm to it. Bring in your own, like, hey, we ran a lot of 12 personnel last year. If you want to run more 11, by all means do it, because if you're running more 11, the defense is going to run a lighter defense. So you could still get run angles or run advantages that you didn't necessarily have in the previous offense. But in terms of numbers and math, you will have it because of the defenses you're going against and how we're running the offense, right? So with that, I don't think teams are going to catch up because the offense is going to change. Now, it depends how innovative John is going to get with his offense from year 1 to year 2, but I would give it at minimum a year for teams to catch up, because this is going to be a new offensive system, even if it's slight percentage changes in personnel packages and types of plays they're running in certain areas of the field. But teams are already expecting this offense is going to be different. And if they guess how it's going to be differently incorrectly, this is going to open up a whole bag of worms for this offense to take advantage of. And like John Morton, like this Broncos offense was dog shit his first year there and was much better his second year there when he was the passing coordinator there. And like, granted, like you can say, oh, you're going from Russell Wilson to Bo Nix, and Bo Nix elevated this offense. Like there were a lot of factors into why this offense changed, and how they called the offense was completely different in 2024 than it was in 2023. So you could expect that change to still happen within the Lions, because last year the Broncos didn't really have many tight ends to utilize. The Lions have 2 or 3 that you could plug in any play of the game, and that offense is still going to run on schedule as it does in any other personnel package. So it's going to be real. I think the first 6 weeks for this Lions offense is going to be really critical to how we think they're going to run it. And then from the middle of the season to the end of the season, seeing how teams adjust is really going to tell us what the longevity of the aggressiveness and the innovativeness of this offense is really going to spell for the next couple of years. But I would put money on it. You got another 2 to 3 years at least. And that's if John Horton stays around past that, because if he does well, he's going to get a head coaching gig somewhere else.
Yeah. And before we get into the rest of this season, I kind of want to talk about how they finished last season, specifically on the injury side with their playoff run, right? There were a lot of guys that helped them get to that 15-2 record that were not available for the one playoff game they ended up playing against Washington. So could you kind of talk about, some of the key losses that the Lions faced, and maybe how those losses coming back this year can kind of get them back on the right path?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this a little bit with the Jets, because Aaron Glenn, who was the DC in Detroit, is now the head coach of the Jets. But 13 total defensive players on IR by week 17. 6 of them were starters, 5 of them contributors. But I think what made Aaron Glenn and this defense really transform was his willingness to get away from what he's used to running. And they switched from zone, which they were running more man than everyone else in the NFL. But once all those injuries happened, he said, fuck it. We're going to run man-to-man. I'm going to let my sub guys come in and rush the passer. We're going to run unique pressure packages and blitzes, and we're going to get after it. And even with all the injuries, they were second in pressure rate generated at 34.2%, and they were second in man coverage rate at 37%. And they were first down in cover 1, which is one of the most rare defenses you see in the NFL, which cover 1 is just one safety over the top. And sometimes that means you bring five pass rushers, or you bring 4 and you have one of the linebackers sit in the low hole, or a safety come down and sit in the low hole. They were 35.2% in cover 1 calls. That's insane. And cover 3, I know a lot of people say too high is becoming the meta in the NFL. Cover 3 is still the most run defense in the NFL, because teams will come out at too high and then post-snap rotate down into 1 high. They were 31st in cover 3 calls at 20.9%. Cover 3, just across the NFL, if you take out the Lions, is ran 58% of the time. So almost 3 times less than the NFL average. They're running the most basic coverage call in the NFL. And that just speaks to Aaron Glenn and how he trusts his guys, even the backup, saying, hey, we're going to allow you to lock up man-to-man. I'm going to dial up a pressure or a stunt and let guys get to work, and we're going to see what happens. And that also helped on their first down blitz rate. When they were 3rd and 6 to 10, kind of that middle to long range, they were first in blitz rate at 68.7%. Like, that's just stupid. Like, no one's running. Like, normally 3rd and long, you're like, great, we'll sit back, we'll let our 4 get after it. He said, nope, we're applying even more pressure. I'm leaving everyone on an island and saying, our pressure is better than your quarterback against pressure. We're going to make something happen. And until that Commanders game in the divisional round, they did. Like, they were awesome in those situations. But you can't run man coverage against Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and Cliff Kingsbury. You just can't do it all game, and we saw what happened in that as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into their dark horse, you highlighted a guy on the offensive line, Christian Mahogany.
Yes, sir. Dude, I love Mahogany. When he was coming out of Boston College, he was not my highest rated interior guy. I can actually if you want to pull it up on your end while I talk about him. But in my interior offensive line blog, I talk about his size and his ability to move at his size and just create massive rushing lanes. Now he's going to get a chance to start because now Kevin Zeitler's gone. Graham Glasgow might be moving to center, maybe Tate Ratledge, but either way, a guard spot is open. He's going to take full advantage of that. He's 6'3", 322 in terms of his combine measurements. He might be a little bit heavier, might be a little bit lighter, but either way, he did not have a large sample size of snaps last year. He only got 75 blocking snaps in the regular season. But on those 75, he was 21st in overall run blocking. And this is across the entire NFL. So this is guys who even played one snap and had a kick-ass snap, right? Like he was 21st in overall, 15th in pass blocking. He was tied 22nd in run blocking out of over hundreds of interior offensive linemen. And he was one of 9 linemen in the entire NFL, regardless of snap count, to have an 80-plus run block and pass block grade. Like, that is, you're entering elite level. Like, Lane Johnson had that. Jordan Mailata had that. Chris Lindstrom, maybe not Chris Lindstrom. Creed Humphrey had that. There's a couple of other guys. Quentin Nelson, I think, had that this year. He dropped off a little bit, but this year he came back. He was another guy that had that. A lot of top-name offensive linemen fit into that category. He was one of them. Yes, much lower snap count, but it's still the same principle. And in the one full game that he played 65 snaps. He started in for Kevin Zeitler, who was hurt. He got an 82.5 pass block grade and a 70.4 run block grade. And we've talked about it in other episodes. An 80-plus PFF grade is great, and a 70-plus is good. 60 and above is average, is what we look at. PFF is the grades are not like school where 65 is or 64 is failing. Like a 60 PFF grade means you're average or above average, right? Depending on where you rank. And he was good to great in both categories. This is someone you're now asking to start and fits what this offensive line is looking to do to defenses, and that's create rushing lanes and forces defensive tackles to second guess, is it runners and pass, and that's going to slow down their pass rush. So someone who is a bit slower like Christian Mahogany is going to get an extra split second to get into his kick step, get depth, and guess what? You're not bull rushing someone who's 322 unless you're a top 5 defensive tackle in the league like Dexter Lawrence, Quinton Williams, Chris Jones. Like, you are not bull rushing someone with that size and that mass and strength. It's just not happening. It's physics 101, right? Like, he is going to be so fundamental for this Detroit offensive line. And I believe he was a 7th round pick. I had him graded as a day 2 pick. And the fact they got him in the 7th round, let me just double, he was 6th round pick. But either way, just unbelievable in terms of what he was able to bring to the table in terms of size and athleticism. And now he gets a chance to start in a repolished offense where teams are going to be second guessing themselves anyways. I think he might be a top 10 interior offensive lineman at the end of this year. And that's a hot take because there's a lot of damn good ones out there. But just with, like, it's 1 + 1 is 3. I talk about that all the time in football. This is the epitome of that down to the position level from a micro level. He's going to have an awesome season, I think.
Yeah. And finally, the burning question for Detroit. Obviously, after a great season that they've had, you know, it's hard to pinpoint downsides, but if you had to, it's obviously when your team has such a great run, you know, everyone kind of wants a piece of the pie, right? So obviously we saw Ben Johnson go to division rival Chicago. We saw Aaron Glenn, which we talked about on our last episode, go to the New York Jets. And like you said, I mean, this offensive scheme and the defensive schemes are, you know, they're flexible enough where Dan Campbell can bring in a new guy and do his best to meld the system that was running with what a new coordinator wants to bring in. But you still lose some nuances of the coaches that help bring you to 15-2. So even with those absences, do you feel like Detroit has a realistic shot of going 3 years in a row as NFC North champions?
I believe so. And just because, Ben Johnson was a top 3 OC, if not the best OC in the NFL. Aaron Glenn was the top 3 DC, maybe number 1 with how adaptable he was with all the injuries the past 2 years, right? So you lose 2 of the most innovative and effective coordinators in the NFL. But who they're bringing in, John Morton alone, and how this offense is going to shift is going to give them advantages because, like I said, defenses are going to second guess themselves. But Kelvin Shepard as a defensive coordinator, he's homegrown. Like he was a role-playing NFL player, mainly a special teams guy, got in a couple of games and was okay in the time he got. But like we talked about in the AFC East episode, you see guys who were okay, below average NFL players who turn into great coaches. I think Kelvin Shepard plugged in very easily as DC for the Lions. Now, like we've seen with some other former players who became DCs that struggled early on, I think Kelvin Shepard is going to have his struggles, but the offense is going to help supplement that and kind of put a Band-Aid on it and said, look, we're unpredictable too. So while you figure it out, we're going to force defenses to figure us out as we go throughout this process. So I think the Lions can absolutely win the NFC North again. I think they will win the NFC North again just because of how loaded this roster is top to bottom. I think defense will take a little bit of a step back because normally when you replace a DC, that's what happens. Offenses, sometimes the offense gets better because offense is typically a lot less predictable than defense. But I think if anyone can make this defense take a step forward, it would be someone like Kelvin Shepard, who is a former player, was hired by the Lions and was the assistant DC and has worked his way up through this culture and through this program. And now you have a pretty much fully healthy defense, and you kind of get to run exactly what you want. Like, for all we know, Kelvin Shepard could be more zone heavy than Aaron Glenn was. And that alone puts in a wrinkle to what these offenses are expecting against this type of defense. And I think for those reasons alone, just the unpredictability is going to be enough to give them an NFC North win. And then you add in the talent of this team, top to bottom on top of that. It's a perfect recipe for another NFC North win.
Absolutely. And moving on to the next man up in the NFC North, the team that finished just a game back, the Minnesota Vikings. They finished their last year with a record of 14-3. Really, the big story with the Vikings last year was Sam Darnold, right? Massive breakout year from Sam Darnold. He had kind of hopped around a couple teams. He had spent, obviously 3 years with the Jets. He was kind of seen as, a potential savior, but as we've talked about, it's kind of hard for the Jets to develop quarterbacks. Spent 2 years in Carolina, a year as a backup in San Francisco, but going into Minnesota, starts 17 games, leads him to a 14-3 record. Whether or not you think a QB stat is a win, has his career high in touchdowns, yards, attempts. Rating. He had one of the best.
He was one of the deep passers in the NFL. Not to interrupt you, but he was awesome with the deep ball last year. Which I'm sure.
Not only was this his best season, but it was a season in which he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Obviously, now the big thing is he took his talents to Seattle, so that's going to be a big change, and they got JJ McCarthy coming in. And I know we kind of wanted to get into, Kevin O'Connell, but first I did kind of want to start with JJ McCarthy, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, man.
JJ McCarthy, obviously coming off that Michigan team, which, as of today, when we're recording this, got handed some, in my opinion, light punishments from the NCAA due to the whole, Connor Stalions situation. But regardless, JJ McCarthy, exciting player coming out of college, now finally has, the reins of this team. And he's got one of the best receivers in the NFL to throw to in Justin Jefferson. Yep. So what do you think JJ McCarthy should take from a year under Sam Darnold to succeed with this Vikings team?
I think processing is number one, right? Because JJ McCarthy was in an offense that a lot of people say, oh, it was run heavy. He was a handoff merchant. Like, he didn't really do much. Like, they look at the national championship game. I think he went like 9 of 20 or 10 of 21 with just over 100 yards. They're like, he was not the reason they won the national championship. No, he wasn't the reason. But the reason they even got there to begin with was because of JJ McCarthy. And especially on third down. Like, in that year of college, he was far and above the best third down passer in all of college football. And it wasn't even close. I wish I had the graph or the numbers on me to kind of showcase on this podcast for the viewers at home rather than the listeners. But JJ McCarthy on third down was, in terms of EPA, conversion rate, yards on third down passes, and average depth of target on third down throws, he wasn't just dinking and dunking it and letting someone get yards. He was putting this ball 10 to 15 yards downfield on a 3rd and 4 on a backside dig and going through his whole read progression and saying, hey, I'm going to let this play develop. I'm going to trust my O-line. And if my O-line crumbles, I'm athletic enough to get out of the pocket and hit someone late on a throw and create a passing window that wasn't there in the concept. That's what JJ McCarthy is going to bring to the Vikings, which they're going to need. Like, this offensive line is much improved from last year, but this offense, with how it's designed, is determinant on a quarterback being able to mitigate pressure. And out of that entire class, besides Jaden Daniels, because of his just straightaway speed, JJ McCarthy was one of the best at mitigating pressure. Like, Caleb Williams was my favorite player in that class and my top player in that class. And even he struggled in pressure situations, right? Which we talked about in the NFC East episode. But JJ McCarthy brings a better flow in the pocket and more athleticism than Sam Darnold has ever brought forward in any time in his career, right? So I think JJ McCarthy is going to surprise a lot of people. And he might not be good right away out of the gate. He's going to have his normal struggles because he didn't have a true rookie season. We have to treat 2025 as a true rookie season for him. But with a full offseason in the Vikings facility under his belt, I think a lot of the hangups that normal rookie QBs have, he's going to get over those a lot faster. And having the best wide receiver in the NFL is going to help him with that. Having a top 5 tight end is going to help with that. Having a much improved offensive line is going to help that. And not only that, this defense is fucking nuts, dude. Like, top to bottom, which we'll get into the defense later, but oh my God, Brian Flores is a machine in terms of defensive pressure and stunts. And that alone is going to help JJ McCarthy out, even on opposite sides of the ball. Like, I'm super high on JJ McCarthy. I have been since he left Michigan. I had him ranked above Jaden Daniels, which in hindsight was kind of stupid, but it just showcases how good Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels were coming out of college. That if I put JJ McCarthy above Jaden Daniels and some of the shortcomings I thought Jaden Daniels have, he was able to exceed that. I can't wait to see what JJ McCarthy does in an offense as fleshed out and as multiple as this Vikings offense is, even with Jordan Addison being suspended, which we'll talk about how they're going to help mitigate that.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the defense, we obviously talk about the big change, right? JJ McCarthy is now in control of this team on the offensive side, but, there's still a lot of continuity. One big piece being head coach Kevin O'Connell.
Oh, yeah.
This is his 4th year as head coach of the Vikings, and over the past 3 years, he's built a 34-17 record with this team. Fantastic for your first head coaching gig. Obviously, I think this is going to be a very coaching-heavy podcast in comparison to some others.
Oh, yeah.
But they really drive. They really drive teams in this division. So for you, Kevin O'Connell, how quickly do you think he'll be able to adapt his game plan fully around a guy like JJ McCarthy?
I think he will really develop it, because I think every quarterback that he's had coming up to JJ McCarthy has kind of had a trait that combines into what JJ McCarthy is now, right? Like, you look at Kirk Cousins, he gets a lot of shit, especially with how he played this last year in Atlanta, but we're looking at someone who's really good in the short to intermediate game. And that's where he made his living and why he got such a big contract, is that where teams are looking for a big rocket arm passer, like when Mahomes came to the NFL, Kirk Cousins was exploiting that intermediate to short area better than any quarterback in the league, besides maybe your traditional top 5. Like Tom Brady did a really good job of that, and he still had a great deep ball on top of it, right? So you have Kirk Cousins who could exploit that. Then you have your athletic quarterbacks like Jaron Hall and Josh Dobbs that Kevin O'Connell had to work with in 2023. JJ McCarthy is a really good athlete that a lot of people don't realize because he didn't have to use it much, but he's got good speed, he's got good pocket mobility, and if he has to scramble, he's going to outspeed linebackers relatively easy. So you have those all together, working together, and then you have Nick Mullins, who's a decent backup and someone who you can just plug and play. Like, JJ has that plug and play ability. Like, and I'm not saying that JJ is a backup level quarterback, but I'm just saying if JJ McCarthy didn't practice for a month, you could plug and play him and he's getting over a 60% completion rate. Like, he's going to be able to be like, all right, cool, let's run quick slants. Let's run an out concept with hitch. Let's run a flood concept. I'll deliver the ball wherever it needs to go, even if it's to my 4th read in the flat. Like, I'll get it there and I'll get us 10 yards in a cloud of dust in the pass game, right? Like, what Kevin O'Connell, and that's without mentioning Sam Darnold's deep ball. Like, JJ McCarthy has a strong arm. Like, people don't realize that because Michigan ran the ball so much. But, like, if you look at any of JJ McCarthy's deep passes in that last year at Michigan, man, his arm is so live. And his first preseason game against the Raiders, he was standing on the right hash and got the ball halfway into the end zone on the left side of the field. So he's throwing cross body this way and pins a receiver who wasn't open when he threw the ball. He threw him open. Like, and yes, you can say it's preseason, they're going against backups, but when you look at football from that lens, you really lose the process and you lose what quarterbacks and what other position players are able to do in space. And as the play progresses, JJ McCarthy has awesome anticipation. He has a live arm. He's pretty athletic, and he can dink and dunk in the pass game, which kind of gets shit on, but is a very important part of quarterback play and why Tom Brady was able to play for 20 plus years. JJ McCarthy has that. And when you put all that together, you have a really damn good quarterback. And when you pair him with someone like Kevin O'Connell, who has had a QB shuffle for the past 3 years and still went 34-17, man, and they had the 12th ranked passing offense in those 3 years from an EPA perspective, like, that's awesome. Like, he finally has his guy he can tailor this offense to and say, hey, here's the play. Go do what you want to do with it. And he's probably going to struggle early on, but we're going to see like Bryce Young levels of resurgence in the second half of the season, because we'll get into this in the NFC North episode. Bryce Young was one of the best quarterbacks in the second half of 2024. JJ McCarthy is going to be the best quarterback in the back half of 2025. And this is going to be a hot take episode. Christian Mahogany, top 10 interior offensive lineman. JJ McCarthy is going to be the best week 9 to week 18 quarterback that we will see this year in the NFL, assuming he doesn't get hurt. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, love that. And also, I wanted to point out something you highlighted. You talk about, people say he was, he handed the ball off way too much in college, but his junior year, the year that he won the national title with Michigan, he was 9 yards short of 3,000 on the season. So, I mean, look, the dude can throw. We should all acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
Let's talk on the defensive side of the ball. You gave me a big list of defensive players that you
sorry
really
about
love.
that.
No, the more the merrier, right? I mean, we need to give the people some good analysis. So for you, I mean, just break down some of these guys and where you think they're going to be monsters heading into this regular season.
Absolutely. And it starts with Brian Flores at the top, right? He runs a super complex defense that a lot of teams, whoever plays the Vikings, is going to have a tough time with. Even some of the best. I mean, you see the Lions, right? Like, the Lions struggle to move the ball against this defense, and they see them twice a year. They get more film on these guys than any other team in the NFL, right? So what this defense does is, and this is the easiest way I can explain it, but Brian Flores will show like he's going to blitz 8 and then only bring 3 and drop the other 5. And that can happen 3 guys on the left, 3 guys on the right, 3 guys in the middle, or some weird combination where you could have the widest guys coming and the guy inside rushing the center, or two guys rushing the guards, and then one of the apex players rushing, or some other combination, right? And there are other times where he'll have three lined up in head up on the center and two guys head up on the guards, and out of nowhere, right before this ball is snapped, he's bringing 6 to 7 guys, sometimes even 8, and he's saying, I'm putting everyone on an island. So with how he differentiates, and sometimes he'll drop defensive linemen in the coverage, like Harrison Phillips, I think out of all D tackles had the most coverage snaps. Like that's in and of itself is crazy. And the fact that the defense is successful as it is with someone like that on this defense doing that, like this defense is perfectly tailored to what he's trying to do. And it's all done with high-level role players. Like the only like superstar, quote unquote, they have in that defense is Harrison Smith, and he's going to retire within the next year or two, or maybe he plays until he's 40. He's going to be 35 as a safety, let alone a white safety, and not to discriminate to my complexion counterparts, or my complexion compadres, but white DBs do not last in the NFL for that long. So that's in and of itself, right? But if we want to talk about who they brought in and who's been great on this defense, we're just going to go PFF grades, just overall defensive grades, just keep this short. And I know people have their hangups on PFF grades, but I think there's enough data out there now to kind of support how these grades work. But Jonathan Grenard, free agent pickup from the Texans, 80.8, great grade there. Byron Murphy, 72.8, his best year of his career so far as a cornerback. Blake Cashman, little bit of a step back from his time with the Texans, but fits perfectly into what this defense does from a coverage and blitz standpoint. Andrew Van Ginkel, one of the most underrated edges in the NFL in terms of pass rush and pressure rate, and just perfect fit. He can drop in coverage or rush the passer. He's awesome off the edge. Josh Metellus plays anywhere on the field. You could put him at free safety where he's the only one over the top. You could have him blitz from the slot, or he's even played edge rusher. Like he can play wherever you ask him to and helps keep this defense multiple. 67.5, an above average defensive grade. And Ivan Pace Jr., one of the best blitzing linebackers in the league at a 64.6. That's solely because of his blitz grade. Like he is perfect for this defense and how they like to bring guys from different angles. Like he's awesome, and he's going to get better in coverage and as a run defender. But to just ask him to come and rush the passer as an undrafted free agent and play as much as he does is really neat, right? So, like, those are 6 names that I think really stand out in this defense. Like, obviously, Harrison Smith is a rock on this defense and really sets the tone. Harrison Phillips, who I talked about earlier, like, isn't a good player, but this system helps elevate him and allows this system to be multiple. He can line up as a true nose tackle, as a zero tech, head up on the center, or he can widen out to a 5 tech and get after the pass. Like he can line up truly anywhere on this defensive line. And that's not including guys that they brought in like Jonathan Allen. Dallas Turner going to his second year as a pass rusher is going to develop and do well. Like there's a lot of guys on this defense who are going to do really friggin' well. And that's led to last year, at least, they were second in EPA per play allowed, second in EPA per dropback allowed, and first in EPA per rush allowed. This was one of the best defenses in the entire NFL last year. And it's because of your typical role players who come together, are starters, and are perfect in this defense. And that all speaks to Brian Flores and what a genius he is on the defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. And then I want to get into one guy that you feel like is going to be the dark horse for the Vikings, and that is Dwight McGlothern. What do you like?
Yes, sir. Well, he was my 12th cornerback in my 2024 prospect class, and he was a really good zone corner. And what this defense thrives in is zone coverage. They ran the second most zone last year at a 95.1% rate, which is just stupid. They barely ran any man coverage. But when you have a defense with as many role players as this, and Brian Flores, who understands zone coverage better than anyone, you get the type of defense you do. And I think Dwight McGlothern kind of translates perfectly into this defense. You know, he did exceptionally well in cover 2 and cover 4 throughout his college career, both of which the Vikings were second in cover 2 and 9th in cover 4 calls this year. You know, the first play I ever saw of Dwight McGlothern, he was in cover 2. So in cover 2 as a corner, most of the time, you're in a hard flat. So even if your receiver goes deep, you sit in the flat and you wait for an out route or a flat or some sort of shallow corner. You're sitting and waiting for there. And the first rep I saw of him, his wide receiver went deep. So he shoved off his receiver and kept his eyes on the QB. QB came to throw the flat, and he came right down and picked it off and went for a pick six. Like Travis Hunter style play that we saw against UCF with him, right? Which we'll clip that somewhere on here, I'm sure. I'll get that clip for you. But like that level of play and extinction. And kind of like I talked about Joe Andreessen last episode as a linebacker for the Bills, you kind of have that same opportunity for Dwight McClellan, where Jeff Okudah, who I loved in college, has not panned out in the NFL and has proven he is not a good outside corner in the NFL, which, granted, with Brian Flores, that might help, but we'll see what happens. But Jeff Okudah, I'm not going to bet on him. Mekhi Blackman is coming back from a torn ACL, so we'll see what happens with him. So Dwight has a perfect opportunity to take over one of those two spots opposite Byron Murphy and say, look, I'm going to be the corner on the other side. I'm going to get targeted more than Byron because Byron's a good corner and teams aren't going to target him. Let me make plays like I showed when I was at Arkansas, and let me just get after it. And I think he will be really good in this style defense, especially being zone heavy, having savviness in zone coverage, especially in cover 2 and cover 4, which the Vikings run more than almost anybody else in the league, right? Like, I think he would be perfect as the quarterback 2 opposite Byron Murphy. He's also, I believe he's 6'2", 200, where Byron's like 5'11" or 5'10". Like, he's the perfect opposite corner to be a Byron Murphy, right? Like, I might have the sizes a bit wrong, but I'm actually going to pull that up while we're talking about it. But, man, like, he wasn't my favorite corner in that class, or he wasn't my top corner, but, man, he was friggin' good at Arkansas, dude. Let me see. So, Dwight McClellan size. Yeah, he's 6'2" and 185. So, not 200. He might be 200 now with NFL weight on him after a season, but, like, 6'2" opposite Byron Murphy, who's 5'10". Let me see. Size. Let me see. Of course, it's going to give me Byron Murphy from Texas and not Byron Murphy, Washington size. Kind of going up. Yeah, 5'11", 190. So two completely different archetypes of corners. Brian Flores is going to love that and take full advantage of that, I think.
Yeah. And so the burning question for Detroit, I might throw another curveball at you here. Or sorry,
That's
for
fine.
Minnesota. For Minnesota, I might throw another curveball at you here. They lost both games to Detroit in the regular season. That's why I got confused with Detroit there. Week 7, they lost at home, 31-29, and then they finished out the season with a 31-9 loss at Ford Field. So they let up the same amount of points, but they scored less in their second encounter. What can Minnesota do to get at least one off of Detroit? Maybe just get the one at home.
Not have Sam Darnold play in a critical game where you're trying to win the 1 seed, which JJ McCarthy has proven he can do in the Rose Bowl and in the college championship, regardless of what the box score says. He was still critical in both of those wins. Having the added athleticism of JJ McCarthy and having a better offensive line. They brought in 2 of the Colts offensive linemen. They brought in Ryan Kelly and Will Freeze, and then you draft Donovan Jackson, who has tackle and guard flexibility out of Ohio State. Like, if Christian Darrisaw gets hurt like he did last year or isn't 100%, Donovan Jackson can plug in a tackle and you can fill in a guard with another player. And this offense is still going to click on all cylinders, where last year they lost Christian Darrisaw. They kind of scrambled. Sam Darnold played a little bit worse. And then you play a Lions team that blitzes heavily, runs man coverage heavily. And if you hesitate for a half second like Sam Darnold did, you end up in a 31-9 game and you lose out on the 1 seed. JJ McCarthy is not going to have that problem. If that situation happens again with second-year JJ McCarthy, I think the Vikings make that more competitive, and I think they might win with this offensive line and how this offense is schemed. And now remember, Jordan Addison is going to be more fresh than the rest of the offense because he's got the first 3 games off with a suspension, right? Like, he can still practice. He can still be a part of meetings. Like, he is going to do well towards the back half of this season, and that's going to help JJ McCarthy because teams are going to blanket, Justin Jefferson, and instead of throwing to Ty Felton and Jalen Naylor, he's going to have a really good wide receiver too. Like JJ McCarthy elevating this offense is going to be such a big focal point for the Vikings that a lot of people aren't expecting. Again, I don't think they're going to win the division, but if, let's say, both teams are 13-3 going into week 18, I don't think they play in week 18, but let's say it's week 16 or 17 or whenever they play. You can look this up for me. But if it's the second matchup between those two and they have the same record, I trust JJ McCarthy more to run this offense and carry the Vikings to win than I trust Jared Goff running a brand new Lions offense.
So their first meeting, it's pretty crazy. So their first meeting is week 9 in Detroit. And then their second meeting is going to be Christmas Day, week 17 on Netflix in Minnesota.
Dude, that's going to be an awesome game.
Yeah,
that's
a fantastic game.
And at home, you better hope the Vikings win that one.
Yeah, 3:30 p.m. kickoff for that one.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love football Christmas, man. That was an awesome change of pace this year. Like, even though, like, the Texans got worked and the Steelers got worked, like, that was still really fun to watch.
I don't love it. But
well, you're a basketball guy. So.
I'm a basketball guy. I like even outside of me being a basketball guy, not to get off on like a side tangent here.
Oh, that's fine.
Like, I just think it's better when sports kind of respect each other's ground in terms of holidays.
Interesting.
Like Thanksgiving belongs to football. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day belong to college football. You know what I mean? I think Christmas Day belongs to basketball, except if Christmas Day is on a Sunday. If Christmas Day is on a Sunday,
it's a football
free reign because Sundays belong to the NFL.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it's
go ahead. Sorry.
Like, what I was gonna say is, like, you know, it's one of those things where, I think we should think of it as a treat when we got a big NFL day and a big NBA day on the same day, not just kind of expect it because every single league is constantly fighting for eyeballs, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's a current thing that I don't really love about this current sports media landscape. It's like no one's really giving each other room to breathe, and everyone wants to be a 24/7 365 sport. And I think the general watching population doesn't really want that as much as the leagues want it to be.
Well,
but
that's what happens when you have a capitalist society. That's just me. Sorry, not to get into politics, my name. let's go to the Packers, huh?
Yeah, let's go to the Packers.
Oh man.
Clip that, chat.
Thanks, dude.
But let's talk about the Packers. Speaking of, we're talking a lot about quarterbacks. We're talking a lot about coaches, and I think it just, like I said, it just makes so much sense for this division. And let's talk about the Packers quarterback, Jordan Laube, year 3. Look, I think Jordan Laube, his entire first 2 years as a starter, has kind of been marked by how he's done in comparison to Aaron Rodgers, right? It's kind of it's the Packers cycle, right? I mean, Aaron Rodgers, the beginning of Aaron Rodgers' career was marked by the end of the Brett Favre era, right? So now, though, it's year 3. I think Aaron Rodgers, he's already on his next team after his team after the Packers, right? He went to the Jets and then he went to the Steelers. So we're 2 teams away between Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And this is fully Jordan Love's team. So what do you need to see out of him for you to believe that the Packers are a continued playoff presence and a continued presence in this division?
I need him to add another layer to his game, right? Like there's 3 main areas where quarterbacks can thrive: is how they do against pressure, and that's in terms of adjusted accuracy and how they mitigate pressure and pressure to sack ratio, and how they do in the quote unquote intermediate to deep game, right? Because like any quarterback can, I know this is contrarian a little bit to what I said earlier, but any quarterback can throw in the short game if the offense is tailored to excelling in what they do well in the short game. Because some quarterbacks are better throwing outside the numbers in the short game, and some quarterbacks are better over the middle in the short game, i.e. Russell Wilson versus Jared Goff. Russell Wilson is much better hitting outside the numbers. Jared Goff is much better hitting in between the numbers, right? Jordan Love is good at mitigating pressure, but he is, in terms of avoiding pressure, but he struggles throwing against pressure after he escapes it, right? So if we look at his pressure to sack rate, he is at 8.9%, which is the third lowest in the NFL. That's an elite rate in and of itself, right? And that was the third lowest behind Josh Allen. And I want to say, I forget who the other quarterback was, but he was third. I know that. So third lowest pressure to sack rate, which is incredible. Josh Allen was historical in pressure avoidance rate, right? Mm-hmm. But Jordan Love was tied the ninth lowest in big time throw rate, which is when you're avoiding pressure and fitting a ball into a tight window or hitting a big play after pressure or just a big play in general. He had one of the lowest. And with that, he only had a 0.8% difference between his big time throw rate and turnover worthy play rate. And if you look at the big time quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes before 2023, these are guys with at least 3 percentage points differences between their big time throw rate and turnover worthy play rate. So he's not turning the ball over a lot or putting the ball in harm's way a lot, but he's not pushing the envelope either. And even though he's really elite at escaping pressure, he's not able to do much with it after that. So that right there shows weird quarterback. Like, we don't see that archetype often of being able to mitigate pressure but not being able to do anything with it. Kind of weird. He's middle of the pack in passer grade at 76.6%, which is a good passer grade. But in terms of the rest of the NFL and all how good quarterback play is now, kind of middle of the road. And here's a really weird one. He scrambled 12 times this past season. Aaron Rodgers scrambled more. Injured, coming off Achilles tear, Aaron Rodgers scrambled more than Jordan Love. And Aaron Rodgers had less attempts, or at least less dropbacks than Jordan Love. So that's, and granted, Aaron Rodgers savvy. He scrambled his entire career. He understands rushing lanes where Jordan Love might not. So a lot more veteran experience than Jordan Love, but still weird that a quarterback who has kind of been relegated to this pocket passer archetype is able to scramble more than Jordan Love, who's supposed to be a decent athlete, right? Then if we look at the intermediate and deep passing numbers, we'll start with deep first because deep passing is what a lot of people look at. He had the fifth most deep attempts at 69. He was 17th in adjusted completion rate on deep passes, which is 42%, which is good. But his big time throw rate on deep passes, 19.2%, which is fourth lowest. So he does a good job mitigating the pocket and having deep attempts, but doing anything past that, he's been struggling with. And that's taking away drops, throwaways, being pressured, taking away all that. He wasn't good in terms of big time throws. And then in the intermediate range, he had the same amount of 0 to 9 yard range passes as he did 10 to 19 yard at 69 total attempts in the intermediate range. So what that tells me is this is a quarterback who, if he's not dinking and dunking it, he's not putting it in that intermediate area where we see Jared Goff excel, Lamar Jackson excel, Joe Burrow excel. He's not pushing the envelope that way. So if you have a quarterback who's either chucking it deep or dumping it off, defenses can be like, hey, we're just going to sit in cover 2 all day and say, hey, fuck it, try to beat us over the top. Or we might run cover 3 with hard flats. Try to hit us over the middle and see what happens, right? Granted, that's not every defense, but he doesn't do anything to help himself outside of what the scheme offers him. And Matt LaFleur is awesome with the scheme that he designed. He's a top 10 offensive line in the NFL. He's awesome at what he does, and that's why the Packers have been so good since he's taken over, even in the post-Aaron Rodgers era. But Jordan Love really holds his team back, at least as far as what we've seen the past 2 seasons. He needs to step up and say, look, I'm good at throwing the ball deep when I allow myself to throw the ball deep instead of just kind of crumbling, because I have some of the most deep attempts in the league, and I'm really good in the short game. If I can hit this intermediate area, his game's going to explode in terms of what this guy can do. But until he proves that, he's a middling average quarterback. And that's not what the Packers want after going from Brett Favre, who at the time was a top 10 quarterback. And moving on to Aaron Rodgers, who has now become a top 10 quarterback all time, arguably top 5. Like, very, very good quarterback, will be a first ballot Hall of Famer, despite what some people think. Like, this was a quarterback who was one of the most efficient quarterbacks of all time. Now you go to Jordan Love, who struggles in the areas where Aaron Rodgers is most efficient. Like, you got to pick it up at some point. Like, and I think Matt LaFleur can do a little bit more helping that. But at the same time, Matt LaFleur is doing all of this extravagant RPO and short game shit to supplement Jordan Love's shortcomings. So it's like, there has to be some pull from Jordan Love's side to say, hey, I'm going to pull this offense forward so you can really do what you want to do, Matt LaFleur, and really open up this offense. But we haven't seen it yet. Except during Toyota-thon. That's a different story. He's a completely different quarterback during Toyota-thon.
Gonna get that low APR.
Yes, sir.
I mean, look, to hit on Aaron Rodgers' point that you made, I mean, I think a lot of people have kind of been down on Aaron Rodgers, especially in these past 2 seasons, and even going back to his last season in Green Bay. I mean, look, I have my issues with him because I'm a Jets fan, right? But 10 years ago, 11 years ago, the Aaron Rodgers over Tom Brady debate, I don't want to say it was serious, but it was popular.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people talked about it, and people felt there was a strong Aaron Rodgers contingency. I think over time that's obviously been proven wrong, but that doesn't really detract from the fact that what you said about Aaron Rodgers is true. Like, he is a top 10 quarterback all time, and he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like, he is, one of the greats of our time, no matter what.
I just hate that we were robbed of a Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl in what was it, 2016?
Yeah, man.
Or whatever. Maybe it wasn't 2016. There was some year the Pats lost in the AFC Championship, and so did the Packers in the NFC Championship, and I was pissed. I was like, that would have been an all-time great Super Bowl. But it might have been 2014. But when the Pats beat the Seahawks, I think the Packers lost to the Seahawks that same year.
Yeah.
If I remember that correctly, because that was the Bostic muffed onside kick.
Yes.
That was that. But again,
I mean,
getting off tangent, continue your point.
Yeah. But one thing about Aaron Rodgers that, we kind of saw, especially towards the end of his career in Green Bay, that we are seeing now with Jordan Love, that Green Bay has kind of pivoted on, is they have finally drafted a wide receiver in the first round.
Thank God.
I wish I had some graphics, like with some confetti and some like a disco ball, maybe.
Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out all the Evangelion fans out there. But they took Matthew Golden, 23rd overall pick from Texas. Great player from a great Texas team. What can he do to not only help the Packers get some wins, but also elevate Jordan Love's game?
Absolutely. And here's what I will say. Matthew Golden is going to be a very, very, very good wide receiver too, in terms of like Jordan Addison, T. Higgins level wide receiver too. Very, very high-end and good. So even though he was drafted in the first round, I don't believe he's a true X or wide receiver 1 like we've seen with some other receivers in the league. With that said, just being on the field day one, he's going to be Jordan Love's third or at best second favorite target, but behind someone which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Matthew Golden is super. He's kind of reminds me of Chris Godwin a little bit in terms of he's not the most athletic, he's not the strongest, and he's not the biggest, but he knows how to find open zone or open spots in zone coverage. He knows how to beat someone in man coverage. Like everyone looks at his 40 speed, they're like, oh wow, this guy's a barn burner. No, he's not. Like, his game speed does not translate to the 40 speed, but that's okay. He still has good speed. He still is a good athlete. He understands pacing, which is a huge spot for wide receiver play. Like, people look at Tatoria McMillan's film, which we'll talk about in a second, but because he was obviously in the same draft class, and people be like, well, he doesn't really separate well, or he doesn't really, he kind of relies on contested catches. He relies on contested catches because he forces himself into those situations because he's 6'5" and can go up and get it. Matt Golden is kind of the same in a different lens where he's like, well, I'm going to pace routes and then at the last second burst, and with that 4.2 speed and acceleration, I'm going to burst out of that break and maintain speed to give myself a yard of separation so I can catch a quick slant or a quick out or hit a comeback or a backside dig. Like, he is so good in just understanding route tempo and when his route is supposed to get open. It totally merited a first-round pick. I had a first-round grade on him. Not as high as some other receivers in this class, but I thought he was really good and would have been a first-rounder even in last year's loaded receiving class. Like, I would have had him above Ricky Pearsall, right? Like, he is so good, like, in terms of route running, how good his hands are, maintaining his speed out of breaks, which is, like, you could be an NFL receiver and round off your routes, but if you maintain your speed and rounding off, it doesn't matter if it's a crisp cut or a round off cut. Like, as long as you maintain your speed, that's what matters in the NFL. And so, like, when people look at these 7-on-7 clips, like, oh, look at how much he stutters and how much he breaks, you don't know which way he's going to go. That doesn't matter if you can't maintain your speed. An NFL DB is going to keep up with that. That's going to allow them more time to accelerate.
Yep.
But if you keep your speed as good as Matt Golden does, who I think he was one of the best outside of Travis Hunter at maintaining speed out of cuts, like, man, he's going to be so damn good in this offense. Like, he'll get over 1,000 yards a couple of seasons. He'll be good. I don't think he'll ever be, like, leading the league in receiving yards, but he's going to be so good for so long that people are going to think that he's Hall of Fame caliber because of how consistent he is. Kind of like we've seen with Mike Evans with the Bucs, right? Like, people are thinking he's Hall of Fame, and he probably is Hall of Fame potential. He's just kind of been consistent, and I don't want to say stagnant, but just kind of like level his entire career. I think Matt Golden's going to provide that same level of production and efficiency for the Packers that Mike Evans has done his entire career. And they're two completely different type of receivers.
Yeah. I got another target that I know you wanted to talk about, and that being the Packers' dark horse in Tucker Kraft.
Yes, sir.
Talk about what this tight end's going to do to kind of help space out the offense a little bit.
Yeah, I had a choice last year between which tight end I thought was going to be better in terms of fantasy production in Tucker Kraft or Luke Musgrave. Musgrave showed more promise, but Tucker Kraft has shown he is the better long-term option at the tight end position in terms of blocking, receiving chops, just playing the tight end position overall. Like, he is really good, and he's obviously my dark horse for the Packers. There were 31 tight ends and 115 total receivers with 50 targets, right? So out of all those guys, where did he rank amongst them? So he was second in tight ends and 24th in all receivers in yards per reception at 14.1. So out of tight ends, he was in the top 2-3%, and out of all wide receivers or just receivers in general, he was in the top 20% in terms of yards per reception. In terms of reception rate, he was tied 13th and tied 20th at 76.9. So top 5th we're looking at. In terms of yards per route run, which we talk about a lot, for tight ends, it's a little bit lower of a threshold than wide receivers. He was at 1.61, which was good for 10th in the NFL and 60th overall. So out of the tight ends, he's in the top third. Out of all receivers, kind of mid-range, right? But that's good for a tight end. That's what we want. Here's what gets me. He had the third lowest average depth of target amongst receivers and tight ends at 5 yards. The fact he was able to do that and was targeted at one of the shortest distances among all receivers in the NFL just shows me what he can do after the catch is devastating to defenses. With that, he was 4th amongst tight ends and 6th overall in passer rating when targeted at 134.6. That is gross. That's disgusting for any receiver to do, especially I don't think he was undrafted, but he was drafted pretty low. I think he was the 6th or 7th round pick, and he was dominant there. And then one of the most stickiest wide receiver stats we can look at is first downs per route run. He was 8th among all tight ends last year and 16th among all receivers at 0.112. So out of every 10 catches, he was getting a first down. That doesn't sound like a lot, But you think of receivers that got, 100, 120, 140 targets per year. He only got 60. He only got, I want to say 60 targets, maybe a little bit less, maybe 55. And he's doing that on every X amount of catches. Like, he could probably lead the Packers in targets this year. Like, he is a dog. Like, I'm going to be looking at, and I hope no one in my fantasy league is listening to this. They're probably going to, but he's going as an 11th or 12th round value. I might reach in the 9th or 10th and be like, yeah, this is my guy, because he's going to be top 10 in fantasy tight ends this year, maybe even higher. And he is already, even outside of fantasy, in terms of actual football, he is a top 10 tight end in the NFL already. And he finally got his shot in one season. He is a great run blocker. He is a good receiver. He is awesome after the catch. Like, he is everything you want a modern NFL tight end to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so with these new targets, with higher expectations on Jordan Laube, I mean, they're always increasing, but this is probably the highest they've been. What can Green Bay do to kind of get in the mix with Minnesota and Detroit? I mean, look, let's talk about Minnesota. I talked about their schedule, right? I believe so. The second to last game for Minnesota and Detroit is each other. Right, I think Minnesota might finish their regular season, hosting Green Bay. So
let me see.
Yeah, week 18 in Minnesota.
Yep.
Vikings, Packers. Right. So Vikings play the Lions, and then they play the Packers. We talked about that week 17 game being super important on Christmas, but then January 4th. I mean, what can the Packers do to kind of make a huge statement potentially going into the playoffs?
Well, here's what I will say. In the bulk of the Packers schedule, they start their season at home against the Lions. So at home in Lambeau, that obviously gives you an advantage, right?
Yeah.
For the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the next 10 weeks, they don't see another NFC North opponent. They play the Vikings twice, the Bears twice, and the Lions again in the last 7 weeks of their season, right? So that alone is going to allow them to build a lot of momentum against not bad teams, but against teams that are not in their division, which division games are always a toss-up. The Packers last year obviously went 1-5, even though they were better than the Bears. And arguably one of those games against the Vikings were better. They just made dumb turnovers at dumb moments, right? Like, they just couldn't hold down their end of the bargain, right? Like, you have so much more room to allow this offense to develop and grow and get Jordan Love in rhythm with Matt Golden and Tucker Kraft and allow Josh Jacobs to cook in the run game. At the same time, you allow this defense to be multiple, to expand, to let Lucas Van Ness develop as a defender. Maybe, I mean, Isaiah Simmons is kind of a bust at this point, but if he can somehow figure it out, he's probably going to figure it out in Green Bay as a dime backer or a nickel linebacker at best, right? If Isaiah Simmons can figure it out somehow, this defense is going to be better. I mean, who did they? Ja'Cory Bennett went to the Eagles, excuse me. But they still have some good corners on that team, even while losing Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander. They bring in Nate Hobbs. They bring in a couple of other guys. Like, this defense is going to figure it out in non-divisional opponents where when you hit this gauntlet where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divisional matchups in your last 7 games, I think this team's hitting the ground running at that point, and that gives them an advantage that they have only one divisional matchup, and it's week 1. And then after that, you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 week run or 9 game run where you're not playing a division opponent and you can try and just feel out how your offense and defense do. That's going to bode well for them more than any other team in the NFL, I think, just looking at their schedule, right? Like, that is what's going to help them get over the top. If Jordan Love can just try new things and try to be more aggressive and get comfortable with being aggressive, that's going to pay off in dividends again in these divisional matchups against 2 times against the Bears, 2 times against the Vikings, and one more time against the Lions.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, let's talk about the last team in the division that finished in last season, the Chicago Bears. What a season it was last year for the Bears. They started off, they headed into the bye week. I just had it. They headed into the bye week 4-2 on a 3-game win streak. That last game of the win streak being against the Jaguars in London. Then they come out of the bye. They lose in probably the most heartbreaking fashion I've ever seen a team lose, but probably for Washington, one of the craziest ways I've ever seen a team win, that 18-15 Hail Mary. And then they proceed to lose their next 9 games. So in that 10-game win streak, 10-game losing streak, Matt Eberflus is fired after 7 straight losses. And then
thank God.
Yeah.
He sucks, dude.
Thomas Brown took over for the last 5 games of the season. He went 1-4. Then obviously there was the head coaching search, and they came up with former Lions assistant coach Ben Johnson, and it seems like people are pretty high on them. I mean, obviously not really high enough for them to maybe win the division, but high on them to make some significant improvements as they try to move forward in the Caleb Johnson era. Caleb Williams. Jesus,
Caleb Johnson
Williams era. Sorry, someone drafted Caleb Johnson in my dynasty league last night.
It's almost 10 p.m. on a Friday night. You're fine.
He's been on my mind. So new look Bears. Ben Johnson is in control. What is he going to bring scheme wise, playbook wise, in comparison to Matt Eberflus, aside from competent football?
Competent football is the standard right there, right? But like this offense is going to look completely different than it did last year under Shane Waldron and Thomas Brown, right? Like they're going the Bears as a scheme ran RPO and screens at 10.1% and 10.2% respectively. So a fifth of your offense is RPOs, which is pre-dedicated on the defense, and then screens, which is based on the pressure they're giving you as you're calling screens. So a fifth of your game is based on what the defense is giving you. That alone is a bad offense. They're going to go to one of the lowest RPO rates and one of the lowest screen rates at 5.2 and 5.7% respectively. That's 10.9% compared to 20.3. That almost cuts in half how much dependent you are on RPO and screens, where you're not letting the defense dictate to you how the offense is running. You're dictating the offense to the defense, what you're running. So that alone right there is going to be a huge shift in this. And I know 10% doesn't seem a lot, but in 1,000 play season, that's 100 more plays. And that's probably 5, 6, 7, maybe a little bit more plays per game that you get to dictate to the defense. That can make all the difference in the world, because football comes down to 5 to 10 explosive plays for you to make a difference on offense versus the other team. Like that's a huge difference in and of itself, right? Now you're going from one of the least heavy run offenses to one of the heaviest rushing offenses. You're going from 33.7% rush rate, which was bottom 5, to 45% rush rate, which is top 5. So a more than 10% difference in non-rushing versus rushing offense. Play action is going to get utilized a lot more. One of the lowest rates at 18.1% to 38%. And this is, again, granted, everything stays the same from last year to this year, which it won't, but in terms of rates, should stay the same relatively within 3 to 5 percentage points, right? Like Ben Johnson is still going to utilize play action a lot more than screens and RPOs, right? So again, an almost 20% jump in play action versus non-play action versus play action, right? Here's where the scheme really comes into it rather than just play calling. The Bears ran a lot of 11 personnel last year with Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and obviously DJ Moore. They ran 11 personnel 72.4% of the time, which was one of the highest in the NFL. That, if Ben Johnson keeps his rates, is going to drop almost 20 points to 54.8, one of the lowest in the NFL. That same rate and change from 11 personnel is going to shift to 12 personnel. And for the listeners at home, 11 personnel just means 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 wide receivers. That's why it's called 11. 1 running back, 1 tight end. 12 personnel is 1 running back and 2 tight ends, which will make sense why they drafted Colson Loveland, even though they already have Cole Kmet, who's an okay tight end. They want to run more 12 personnel with Ben Johnson, right? So you're going from a team that's running a lot of 3 wide receiver sets to a team that's running a lot of 2 tight end and 2 wide receiver sets with 1 running back, right? So from 11 personnel, the shift is going to be 72.4%, which is one of the highest rates of 11 personnel to 54.8, which is one of the lowest. 11 personnel is the most common use personnel packages for offenses in the NFL, and they're cutting that by almost 20 points. Their 12 personnel rate is going to increase from 19.1 to 32.3. Almost a third of the snaps are going to be in 12 personnel with Cole Kmet and Colson Loveland, which Colson Loveland is a damn good route runner, especially out of the slot. If you're in fantasy drafts, I'm taking Colson Loveland over Luther Burden because Luther Burden's a damn good athlete, but Colson Loveland's going to get a lot more usage and a lot more targets than Luther Burden's going to get just because of the shift from 11 personnel packages to 12 personnel packages, right?
Yeah.
The last thing we're going to bring up is the shift in shotgun to under center, and this is going to affect Caleb Williams the most. The Bears ran one of the most shotgun-heavy teams at 68.5%. That's going to shift to 42.7 with Ben Johnson, or somewhere in that ballpark. And then the under center usage is going to increase from 28.4, which was the lowest in the NFL, to 57.2, which is the highest. So getting out of shotgun to going more under center, that's going to be a big shift for Caleb Williams. And I think the biggest pressure lies with him, especially one, because he's a quarterback, but two, he's never played an offense with this much under center and this much where you're turning. Because when you run play action out of gun, your eyes are obviously on the defense, right? Because the running back's coming in front of you. You get to read it out, right? That's why Jalen Hurts has been as good as he is. Because play action, he doesn't have to turn his back. His eyes are glued there, right? Same thing with Lamar Jackson. That's why Lamar Jackson is so effective. He doesn't turn his back to the defense. When you have to turn your back to the defense, as soon as your eyes snap around to the backfield to the linebackers, you have to make a decision like that if you're throwing the ball or not. And Caleb Williams has never been asked to do that, or rarely has been asked to do that as much as he has been in shotgun. So if anyone can do it, I do think it's Caleb, but I think this is going to be a massive shift for him in terms of how this offense functions and how he plays as a quarterback. And we've seen that early on throughout training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything, I guess I should say, is there anything from what you've seen the Lions run last year? Because look, let's talk about Caleb Williams for a second. He had, by NFL standards, he had, a solid to above average season, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of rookie Bears quarterbacks, he probably had the best season ever, right? Yeah. I'm just looking at his he has almost pretty much every single passing rookie record in Bears history last season. So for you, where do you want to see him kind of open up the most, aside from the play action stuff that you talked about?
Stop holding the ball for so damn long. That's like you can look at he was 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And people say, well, he was good at protecting the football. He was only good at protecting the football because he'd rather take a sack than turn the ball over, which in turn, when you take so many sacks as he did, he took 68 sacks and had a 28.2 pressure to sack rate. That is garbage. That sucks, dude. I love Caleb. I think he gets way more shit than he deserves. He's an emotional football player. He's passionate. He's a gunslinger. He's super athletic and mobile. But he tried to do too much for that offense last year, which had more than enough pieces to be halfway decent. And he just sucked. His time to throw was 3.03, which is time to throw is kind of there's no definitive answer. Is it too quick or too slow to get rid of the ball? But when you have a 3.03 time to throw and you're taking that many sacks and you're allowing that many pressures to turn into sacks, it's because he was so afraid of throwing it and forcing a turnover that he'd rather put his offense in a bad position. That's almost worse than taking risks, because usually risk, after a while, if let's say the risks aren't working out, after enough risk taking, they will work out at some point. He wasn't even taking risk. He was giving the bare minimum to this offense's quarterback. So I think this offense is going to force him to be more of a risk taker, just based on the nature of you need to make better split-second decisions and just make split-second decisions in general. But when you look past the box score, he wasn't able to do that. And that's kind of my hang-up with him after his rookie year. like on paper, his rookie year was good, but when you look into the analytics, he was one of the worst quarterbacks we've seen in the past 5 years. And that's including guys like Malik Willis, Sam Howell, Mitch Trubisky at the end of his starting tenure, right? Like there's Nathan Peterman is in that list. Like he was worse than those guys in terms of what makes actual good quarterback play, right? Like, and so I kind of hope Ben Johnson can help rewrite that ship and say, hey, you're a generational talent. And I hate that people put that on him. I know I did myself, but like he legit is a generational talent. Like you can't deny that. Like, and a lot of quarterback success is based on situation like Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Bryce Young this year is going to be a perfect example of that. Like situation helps with that generational talent. And I think Ben Johnson is going to put his name into that bunch. Caleb Williams is going to be in that conversation. He's got to figure it out. And he's got to be better. He's got to be more of a risk taker and not just trying to mitigate risk. He's got to be, I don't give a shit that there's double coverage. I don't give a shit that there's an edge rusher like Myles Garrett or Max Crosby or Nick Bosa or Micah Parsons right in my face. I'm delivering this ball and I'm putting it on a rope to DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Colson Loveland, Cole Kmet, Luther Burden, Olamide Zaccheaus, because in week 16, 17, he's going to catch 2 touchdowns for no fucking reason. Like, he's going to give those guys a chance. And that's what I want to see from Caleb is take chances. Let your arm and let your athleticism do the fucking talking and push this ball downfield and make this Bears offense multi-dimensional and make defenses scared to play you every week. Because he can do that, but if he tells himself he can't because he needs to protect the ball, he is never ever going to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot for Caleb Williams to work on this season. But, talking about going back to last season's second half collapse, we talked a lot about the offense. We talked about where Caleb struggled. We talked about where Matt Eberflus just completely lost control of this team. But, I mean, the defense, it was almost like watching 2 different units, right? The first 7 weeks of the season, going into the bye, they were on fire. And then the last 10, they were probably one of the most unorganized groups of defensive players that we've ever seen. So can you talk about kind of what went wrong for the defense and how they can kind of avoid a collapse like that again?
I think it was a culmination of they felt like shit was hitting the fan too early in the season, especially after a loss like that. Like, being 5-2 versus 4-3 doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're that close to being 5-2 and then you go 4-3 and then you have a rough stretch of divisional games coming up, like they took too many risks. Like we talk about risk taking on offense and how quarterbacks need to do that. Defenses, when you're in the position that they are, kind of need to help mitigate it a little bit more. It's kind of reverse psychology, right? But if we look at from weeks 1 to 17, they were 3rd in EPA per play allowed, 1st in EPA per dropback allowed, and then 4th and 2nd in success rate overall and passing, respectively. So you're looking at one of the top defenses. They were middle of the road run defense, but run defense is like, if you're average and your pass defense is good, you're going to be a top 10 defense in this league, right? Like passing defense matters much more than rushing defense, right? So we're looking at a defense that was top 5 in the NFL from week 1 to 17 from an efficiency standpoint. From weeks 8 to 18, after the Hail Mary, and including the Hail Mary, this is when it drops off. They went to 7th worst in EPA per allowed, so pretty much the 7th worst defense in the NFL. 8th worst in pass and rush defense in EPA allowed. 7th in success rate allowed overall, and then 5th and 10th in pass versus run. So 5th worst pass defense, 10th worst rush defense. And then if you want to look at that, after they had 3 straight losses in a row of 1 possession against all their divisional rivals, the Packers, Vikings, and Lions. They were then the 6th worst EPA per play allowed, 9th worst in EPA per dropback allowed, 6th worst in EPA per rush allowed, and then 3rd, 7th, and 4th in success rate in terms of overall versus the pass and versus the rush. This went from a top 5 defense to a bottom 10 real quick, all because of 1 play. And I don't want to say all because of one play, but when you look at the data, that one play completely transformed this team because you're going to play defense a lot differently if you're sitting at 5-2 and competing with the other guys in your division versus 4-3 and you got to play catch up, right? Like the whole mentality changes, and one play can literally change a team season. Example number one and Exhibit A is the Hail Mary against the Bears. And people will shit on Tyreek Stevenson, who we're going to talk about in a second, but like pumping up the crowd and like shit talking and whatever, like him being out of position really didn't change much about that play. It was a lucky tip that went into the hands of Noah Brown. Like something as lucky and shitty as that can change seasons for two teams respectively. Bears for the worst and obviously the Commanders for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one guy that on the defensive side this year that you feel like could maybe make a change for the Bears, and that's their dark horse, Tyreek Stevenson, the quarterback. What do you like out of him?
So when I scouted him in college, he was really, really solid in man coverage. Now, has that fully translated to the NFL? Not necessarily, but he's barely ran man coverage since he's been in the NFL. And I would have looked at just 2024 in general. So he played over 400 coverage snaps. I think he played 440, 442, something like that. There were 70 corners in the NFL, including outside corners and slot corners or nickels that fit that bill. He had the second lowest man coverage snaps at 65. The only one ahead of him was rookie Tyke Smith. I think he had like 58 man coverage snaps, which Tyke is a better zone nickel corner than a man one. But that's another conversation for, the NFC South. But with that, he had the fifth lowest man rate overall, or man coverage rate, at 14.7%. With that, out of 70 corners, he was the 22nd highest graded man corner at 65.3%. So above average in man coverage, despite running it minimally, despite his skill set being, I'm a man corner, put me on an island, right? Mm-hmm. He was tied for the 29th lowest receiving rate allowed at 53.3%, which is good. He had the 18th lowest passer rating allowed at 75.4. So these are all good numbers, but now put it in the context of how much he's targeted in man coverage. He was targeted the most in man, or the seventh most in man coverage at 4.2 targets per, 4.2 snaps per target. So that means he's getting targeted frequently, and he's allowing relatively low rates of passer rating, completion percentage, and having a low man rate to begin with. So he's given low man rate situations. He's being targeted heavily in man situations. And despite that, he is performing at an above average to good level of man coverage. If you put him in a defense that's heavy man coverage, he's going to do really well. And that's exactly what Dennis Allen brings in from the Saints. We talked about last episode, there are some coordinators who are better as coordinators and are bad head coaches. Dennis Allen is the poster boy of that. He is a good defensive coordinator. He's not a good head coach. And any defense he's been a part of, you will see that when he is just a coordinator. He called the third heaviest man defense in the NFL last year at 36.48% before he was fired. That means Tyreek Stevenson would go from 65 man coverage snaps to 161. He's more than doubling, and he's adding almost 100 more man coverage snaps, which would put him in the top 30 of man coverage volume. You're going to tell me he's not going to do well in this system? Like, he is probably going to be a top 10 man corner in the NFL when it's all said and done. Granted, this is going to be based on PFF. People will bring up a big hoopla about PFF grades. I don't think they're the end-all be-all, but they're part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he's going to do damn well in man coverage. And I know we're talking about Tyreek Stevenson and man coverage defense, but I did want to bring up an honorable mention. One of my favorite players in last year's draft class was Austin Booker out of Kansas. I thought he was a really polished and really good pass rusher. He showed that in week 1 of the preseason. He was tied first in pure pass rush grade at 94.6%, and he had the best pass rush grade out of all defensive players in week 1 at a 96.7%. He got, granted, small sample size, but he had 6 true pass rush snaps and got pressures on 4 of them. 2/3 of the time he was getting into the quarterback's lap on pass rushes in true pass rush situations. Him and Tyreek Stevenson and Austin Booker are going to be awesome on this defense next year with Dennis Allen running it because he likes guys like Tyreek Stevenson and Austin Booker.
All right, so, a lot of things to prove for the Chicago Bears offense and their defense. Obviously, we got a lot of good acquisitions there. But for you, aside from, what can Caleb Williams do in the season? What can this new coach do? I kind of want to ask a question that encompasses all of that and ask you, for you to call this Bears season a success, what is the mark they have to hit? That could be a win total. That could be, say they make the postseason. That could be a certain spot in the postseason that you feel like is exactly where they should be. Or it could just be some sort of developmental quota that they have to hit. Like, you need to see Caleb Williams do this. You need to see the defense do this. You need to see Ben Johnson do this. What is that for you?
I think you have to beat each division team twice. And I don't care if that's at home or on the road. You need to beat the Vikings once, the Lions once, and the Packers once. You have to go 3-3 at the minimum in division matchups. If you don't go 3-3, you better hope you get to 9 or 10 wins. Because if you can't go 3-3 and you can't win at least 7 other games on your schedule with a last place schedule, I just don't know where this team can go forward besides more development and more turnover with this roster, right? Because Ryan Poles might be gone after this year if they have another 5-12 or 6-11 season. But if they are competitive and do well and they trust him to make savvy trades and make good draft picks, then okay, that might help him. But Ryan Poles has made some really shoddy trades and really shoddy draft picks in the past. So this roster needs to elevate and needs to step up in a way we haven't seen the Bears step up since their postseason appearance where we saw the double doink, right? They need to step up in ways we haven't seen in a long time. This defense, I think, can be top 5 and match their cap allocation and match their salary that this total defense has. I think Caleb Williams could be a top 10 quarterback just based on talent. Now, will his scatterbrain take over? Will this offense not be tailored to what his skill set is? That's still left on the table, and we're going to see in 2025 where that lies. But if this team can go 8-9 or 9-8, I think they're in the right direction. If they can somehow make playoffs in a really tough division, that is going to be an awesome feeling for not just Bears fans, but the Bears themselves. Because I don't think playoffs are in their window.
So that would put them ahead of schedule for you.
If they make playoffs this year, they're well ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
And I love Ben Johnson. I love Caleb Williams. I love how this defense is tailored with Dennis Allen calling the shots and who they have on defense. And I think this offensive line is improved and the weapons are improved. I think they're improved everywhere overall. With that being said, I don't see playoffs in their picture. So if they can make playoffs, they're ahead of schedule. If they don't make playoffs and don't win at least 50% of their division games, or they don't finish with 8 wins or more, I'm going to be really worried. 7-10 should be the bare minimum expectations for this team going into 2025.
And that's the thing for the Bears. I can understand why that puts them ahead of schedule for you, because in the NFC North alone, to be a playoff team out of that division, you have to win at least 9 games. I really think that's the bare minimum for any team in this division. Yeah. Because the winner of this division is going to win at least 11, I would say. That's honestly,
I would say 12.
Yeah,
12.
Yeah, 11's not even that hard of a margin for, I think, whatever the best team in this division is going to be. That'd be worse. That'd be a regression for both the Vikings and the Lions.
Yeah, and the Packers won 11-6 and were the third best team in that division. So if somehow everyone finishes with 11 wins or less, holy shit, the Bears' window should be right there to win the division. It's
Bears fans really wishing they were in the NFC South this year.
Yes. Or the NFC East minus the Eagles.
Or the NFC East. I just know the NFC. I just feel like in my lifetime, the division winner, the under 500 division winner, I feel like has come in the NFC South. Someone in fact check me on that. more so than others.
I think the Panthers did it twice, if I'm not mistaken.
I know for a fact the Panthers did it at 7 and 9.
Winners NFL. Consisting of more than 4 teams. Okay, Reddit, don't be a douche. Yeah, I know the Seahawks did it when they had the hold my dick run with Marshawn Lynch. I think the Panthers, I want to say they did it twice with Cam Newton, which is crazy.
Yeah, they definitely did it once.
Maybe they only did it once, but we'll see.
Did they win the division once with Cam Newton at 7 and 9, and then they won the division at 15 and 1?
Yes, with Cam Newton.
God,
I think like 2 years apart too. Like it was something crazy like that.
God, we were so blessed.
Dude, that Panthers team was crazy. It's just unfortunate they ran into one of the best defenses of all time, and that was the one game where Peyton Manning was slightly below average instead of a pumpkin. Like,
not to make myself sound older than I am, but like, man, like I'm so thankful every day that I got to watch prime Cam Newton.
Dude, he was so good.
You know what I mean?
Prime Cam Newton day was crazy. Like, and we knew at the time, like, he wasn't the best quarterback, but he was one of the best players to hit the field, which we talked about last episode. But like, oh my God.
All right,
awesome.
This might really be a dated reference, but if you remember the show Sports Nation, the epitome of just like not that I'm not like one of those people that like, you know, the NFL was only, or, you know, any given league is like was only good like when I was like 12, but like something that just shows like how great it was back then, not even more so than now, but just like a testament to that era was the Sports Nation. I think it was Madden 13, right? Where it was like the bracket of the Madden cover athlete was between Cam Newton and Megatron.
Oh, yeah. Madden 25, I think. Oh, no, it was Madden 13. Madden 13.
Yeah, right. Calvin Johnson ended up winning it, which obviously was well-deserved. But, I mean, just the fact that Cam Newton could have been like a cover athlete like that early in his career was just sick. Anyway,
absolutely awesome.
Long side tangent. NFC North going to be a really good division. It's going to be really awesome. Probably the home of the 1 seed in the NFC. Like, if any division has the highest chance. Yeah. I mean, like, I just feel like they have the most teams in that division that could contend for the 1 seed. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So with that, we've got 3 divisions down, 12 teams down, and we're still going to be going. We're cranking out more podcasts throughout the next 2 to 3 weeks before the season kicks off on September 4th. So make sure you head over to house-enterprise.com for continued preseason football coverage. We've got our college football top 25 already up on the site. Jordan and I both voted in that, so that's going to be really important to check out before the college football season kicks off on August 23rd. If you want more detailed coverage for the 12 teams we've covered so far, just in their own little video, you'll be able to see that on our House Enterprise YouTube channel. We're putting them all on a playlist for you. And then you can keep listening to the Basel Pod wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, on houseenterprise.com, or anywhere else, really. So, for Jordan Laube, I'm Sam Basel. This has been the Basel Pod, and we'll see you guys next time.